Last week, Jesus is talking to religious leaders in Israel. And as he's talking with these religious leaders in Israel, the celebration that we had as part of the church is the celebration of the Holy Trinity. Jesus, in his discussion with the leaders in Israel, is revealing to them his eternal relationship with God the Father, with God the Holy Spirit. Jesus is proclaiming that he has been throughout all time, he is throughout all time, he is God. And he is of God, he is in this very unique relationship with God. And this is a fairly amazing and actually pretty remarkable claim. At the end of last week, in that reading, they tried to kill him for this claim. Jesus left. What Jesus does in this claiming of this relationship with God is he reveals that God is personal, he is relational, he is powerful. That this is how God operates. This is how God operates inside of himself. This is also how God operates out to the world. And so God, looking out, he looks out and he sees the destruction that is alive in the hearts of humanity. He looks out, he sees the destruction in those who claim to worship God, but they don't even know him. He looks out and he is grieved by this destruction that lives in the hearts of humanity. Today, in this gospel reading, we meet Jesus at a town called Nain. And if you aren't familiar with where Nain is, if you haven't been there lately, I've been looking at maps of Israel for some reason. If you think of Israel, there's the Sea of Galilee. In the beginning part of Jesus' ministry, most of his ministry is located around the Sea of Galilee. The Sea of Galilee has it's where Jesus is from. He does most of his ministry up until about the middle of the gospel around the Sea of Galilee. He visits Capernaum and all these places. And as he's doing this, he travels. So they walk around. They walk around the lake. They get in the boat and they sail across the lake. And so Nain, if you're thinking of Israel, the Sea of Galilee is up in the northeast corner. And Nain is just a little bit southwest. It's the only time it's mentioned in the Bible. Just kind of a random place, a random little village, little city there in the Bible. And so why Nain? Why Nain for this miracle? It's just Jesus happened to be walking around. And he walks up to this city at the precise moment that people are walking outside of their gates. As they are going outside the protection of the city walls, the city gates, they're coming outside with a man on a stretcher of beer. He's being walked out of the city because he's dead. He's dead. And there is mourning, and there is weeping. And there's this woman who is there, who is sobbing at the death of her son. This woman, we are told, was also a widow. And so in Jesus' day, if you had no man, if you had no husband and no son, you as a woman, your status in the society was pretty poor. The status of women was not, you could own property, you could do whatever. In Jesus' day, as not that long ago in our world here, you couldn't, as a woman, have all of the things that you needed. So you needed a man. And so part of what marriage did for the woman was it provided her safety and security. It provided her protection. And part of what having children would do for the woman would, especially if she had a son, it would provide her with protection. If something happened, she would go into his house. When Jesus is on the cross, maybe you remember this, one of the odd moments of that is he says to John, or he says to his mother, woman, behold your son, son, behold your mother. He's actually, what he's doing there is he's providing protection for Mary, his mother. He's saying, you will enter into his house. He will be the one who's looking after you, who is caring for you. This is what he does. And so this woman is grieving, she is mourning, she is outside of protection, and her son just died. I mean, she's got to be an emotional wreck. She's got to be just completely lost and adrift. About 3 years ago, it was a long week. My in-laws were in town. They were actually over at Manitowoc, so back in Wisconsin, obviously. About 3 years ago, they're in town. I was preaching at another church because that pastor was on vacation. It was just a busy week. It also happens to be the week that Michael was born. Busy week. I walked into my office on a Monday morning. And the first thing I noticed, you notice your office or like spaces that you inhabit, they pretty much, there's lots of things that just stay the same. Like things just never get moved. There was a clock. It was one of those little digital, kind of like weather clocks, except there was no weather component to it. So it was sitting all the time up there on my filing cabinet. All the time, exact spot, hadn't moved in like a year. Pretty much because I just didn't move it. And I walked into my office, and the first thing I noticed was that this clock was knocked over. I was like, oh, that's odd. I go in, I throw my backpack down on the ground, I go over to turn on my computer. Oh, my computer's not there. Huh. Well, that's weird. I find the computer person, who was the person who's in charge of computers at the school. I'm like, did you take my computer? For any reason? No. I'm like, oh, huh. Well, it's missing. And so I started asking, I'm like, well, maybe the secretary did it. Did you take it? No. Well, maybe, where did it go? Where did it, I didn't know. And so I called the sheriff, and the sheriff ended up coming out about 7 hours later. It's a nice response time. I gotta thank the Brown County Sheriff for that. The sheriff came out about 7 hours later, and all day I'm sitting there just going, where's my computer? I have work I need to do. I'm busy this week. It has my sermon. It has everything I need. I don't have time for this. Why am I outside of protection? And actually, about 5 o'clock that night, I got a call from the youth director. He had been in one of the youth's house, and he swore he saw my computer in the youth's closet. And it turns out he did. The youth happened to have been mad at the youth director, who previously had been in that same office, and about 2 years before me, and apparently didn't know that he had moved. So he came into the office and stole my computer because he thought it was the youth director's computer. Okay. By about 9 o'clock, I got my computer back, and it's like, okay, finally I can get some work done. What happens? What happens when you lose everything? How many of you ever had a computer crash that has important stuff? Well, what happens when you lose everything? This woman today is sitting there having lost everything. She's lost everything. And Jesus comes up to the gates of the town. He walks up, he sees the situation, and the compassion of Jesus goes out to this woman. Oh, the way we would say it, his heart went out to her. His heart, he sees her, and he says, I've got to do something about this. When Jesus looks at situations where he sees people who have been lost in their protection, they don't have protection anymore. He enters into it, and he changes what happens. See, part of this is against the idea that Jesus is kind of a lucky rabbit's foot. I think Christians, sometimes we get this idea from Jesus that if we just, we keep Jesus in our pocket and we, anything, before anything good bad happens, Jesus will take care of us. Jesus won't let bad stuff happen to us. I think this is a barrier for people in the world because we've had lots of bad stuff happen to us. There's bad stuff happening all the time. And Jesus, he doesn't always kiss the alley and make it better. He doesn't always keep bad stuff from happening to you or me. And sometimes I think we think that we're not being protected when this bad stuff happens.